I know it's hard to believe, but this photo is 100% real and has a crazy backstory. It's May 5th, 1979, when the scanner in the newsroom at the Birmingham News begins ringing incessantly from reports from motorists that they had seen a hand sticking out of the trunk of a car. So, Jerry Ayres and Mark Wynn quickly set out to see if they can solve the mystery. They had been driving for hours when all of a sudden they spotted a beat-up beige Dodge heading north on the interstate in Ensley, Alabama. Since Jerry was driving, he asks Mark to take the wheel while he pops his head out the window, taking a couple snapshots of the trunk. Mark radios into the studio telling them to call the police right away because this was obviously not a prank and something was definitely wrong. The pair noticed the hand was almost wiggling as if in distress, trying to get somebody's attention, when all of a sudden the car veers off, suddenly exiting the highway. At this point, they realized that they were being followed and began weaving through the city streets with the two reporters close behind. Using the intel provided by the two men, the police were able to corner the Dodge, and when they popped the trunk, this man emerged. His name was Gary Collier, and supposedly one of the first things he asked for once being freed was a cigarette, and back then everyone had one to give him. He thanked the two reporters, going on to explain he had been in the trunk for 14 hours and had overheard people talking in the car about where to finish him off and dump his body. The police quickly arrested 3 people: Joseph Fendley, his uncle Wilburn Fendley, and the driver, Robin Green. Gary goes on to explain he met the trio in a bar the night before where they had robbed him of a $350 disability check, beat him, and stabbed him with a screwdriver, forcing him into their trunk. Apparently, Gary struggled to stay awake due to carbon monoxide buildup and knew that the only way to survive was to notify others of his presence. So he wriggled his hands through the seal in the trunk, waving to passing motorists. It is very likely that without these two reporters and their determination for chasing the truth, I wouldn't be telling this story and Gary Collier would cease to exist.